So I wanted to do a quick video about my vegetable containers. I grow all my vegetables for the most part in containers. I have a lot of fruit trees. I have, blueberry bushes. I got peaches. I got a lot of stuff, but I have learned through experience here in Central Florida, I live in Riverview, that if you want to grow any of the solanaceous crops, squash, the annual vegetables that we really love to eat, you need the soils here are they're just not conducive to doing it. The nematode pressure is untenable. It's extremely difficult to deal with, and I don't have a huge garden where I can rotate around plots. And I live in an area where my water table's about 10 to 12 feet down depending on the season, and we have really freely draining white sand. Basically is the soil's very sandy, which lends itself to growing some things, but vegetables is not one of them. So that's just a little background on why I grow in containers. These are sub-irrigated containers that I made from molasses tubs. It is an earth box. It's the same design as an earth box. So these grew tomatoes in them in the fall, again in the spring. There was tomatoes and squash, and I don't remember which one. Some of them had tomatoes back to back. And in the fall, again, I'm going to plant tomatoes in them again. And this is all wrong, but you have to, according to sort of conventional wisdom, oh, you got to rotate. You don't want to grow the same thing in the same place. But, I haven't found a lot of good information about revitalizing your potting soil. So this mix initially was like a pro mix, mostly pro mix. And then I mixed in worm castings, probably about 5 or 8 pounds or more of worm castings, a nice heap of worm castings with the Pro Mix. I think there was actually Pro Mix and a potting soil that's called by Happy Frog, I think, called Ocean Forest, and worm castings was essentially what filled up this entire container. And then I am pretty generous with an organic fertilizer. I use a Espoma fruit and citrus tone, I think it's called. It's a 526 fertilizer, and I might put some bone meal into before I plant. But I put probably a couple cups of that organic fertilizer into the soil mix, as well as maybe some langbonite for potassium. It depends. When they were new, but generally speaking, pretty heavy dose of organic fertilizer when it was new. Then when I planted again the following season, I did another application of worm castings. And one of the things that I do here is a nice, like maybe 2 shovelfuls of seagrass. I go down to the bay and I harvest seagrass that's all over blown up on the shore, and I put seagrass in it, and I let it sit throughout the winter and kind of cook down. It's still warm here in the winters. Chop it up, let it sit there as a mulch kind of in the top layer of the soil. And that seagrass has a lot of good ocean minerals in it. And then when it's just before planting time, fork everything up, mix it up good, and another application of worm castings before planting, and plant right into it. And obviously when I'm done with the plant, when I grow a tomato in this, pull it out, 1 tomato per pot. Pull it out. I try to get as much of the roots out, mix it up, kind of break it up, and then I'll put, so I pulled my tomatoes out. Tomatoes finished up the beginning of May. I let these sit for a while because I was kind of lazy. Maybe a month ago, it's 3 weeks ago, it's the middle of July now, I forked in a bunch of seagrass and a big heavy dose of organic fertilizer, and then I just let them sit out here in the sun and get rained on, and just let the rain get in here and let the soil kind of stay moist, let it stay active. It doesn't have roots in it right now, which is not the best, but I want to add that seagrass back to it to get some more minerals in there and let that break down over the summer. We're fortunate here in Florida that our off season for growing most of our vegetables is the midsummer, and it's really hot and it's really wet. So it's the perfect time to compost something. So we kind of just, I kind of let these things just break down in place and add the seagrass, the fertilizer, and then right before planting, I'll give it some worm castings. And I think over time, if it gets too much worm castings in it, it might get a little too dense, in which case I'll probably add some perlite or some straight peat moss or something back into it, maybe perlite, to make sure it stays fluffy enough. But you know, the plants really do consume a lot of the organic matter that's in there. It physically turns into a plant. It gets converted into roots, etc. But I don't dump all this out and redo it. That's like, it's unmanageable to me. So like these ones here, where I grew my squash, I've grown 3 really good crops of squash in these in a row. Oh, see, you can see the that was the summer squash right there, the roots. This thing's just out here cooking in the sun. Bugs are getting in it. It's kind of just hanging out, which again, I need to do the same thing. I need to take off my mulch, fork it up, put a load of seagrass on it, fork it in, chop it up, organic fertilizer, and let it cook down, because it'll be another month and a half I'm going to be ready to plant in this again. I don't know what I'm going to do in them, but that's kind of the way that I choose to go about revitalizing old potting soil that's been used. Don't dump it out. I don't find that that's necessary. I've grown absolutely amazing tomatoes in 3 of these containers 3 seasons in a row. I'm sorry, it was one of them. 2 of them had 3 seasons. One of them only had 2. But that's a fall, a spring, fall, spring. So that's 3 seasons back to back tomatoes in the same container. And I got amazing crops all 3 times. So, but I do feed them, even they're in the containers. It's not just a set it and forget it type thing. And I make sure that the soil is good in here. And, you know, this is the way this works, you know. So you can revitalize the soil that you have by adding minerals and stuff back in. I've thought about rock dust and stuff like that. I don't personally have any experience with that, but I'm thinking about trying it out. This was one that I grew 2 big sun sugar tomatoes in. I need to do the same thing. You can still see some old sun sugar tomatoes here. I need to pull the lid off and work this in. I think I'm going to do cucumbers in this in the fall. So, but yeah, like I said, I just wanted to talk about revitalizing the old potting soil from containers that you grew vegetables in, even heavy feeding ones. You don't need to pour it out. You don't need to let it sit in your compost and dump it half out. I just don't think it's necessary. You need to make sure that it has fertility in it, and it's rested. But you know, maybe this is different if you don't use organic fertilizers and stuff. But because some of the salt content might build up. But the seagrass, I load it in there. I don't bother washing it or anything. I just throw it in there. Some of that salt is actually good, because it's going to get rained on. It's getting rained on out here. We've had 18 inches of rain or so in the last, since these were pulled out. So they've just been getting rained on, and the stuff kind of leaches through and it sits in the bottom of the container, and I'll drain that water out and wet it back down, you know, when it's time to plant. But again, I just wanted to go over that, revitalizing your old potting soil. Don't dump it out. Add to, mix it in. So check it out.